They teach you how to survive a war, how to field strip a rifle in the dark, how to navigate by the stars, how to tell the difference between incoming and outgoing fire. They teach you how to lead, how to follow, how to become a weapon. What they don't teach you is how to come home. They don't teach you how to stand in a grocery store and not feel the walls closing in, or how to hear a car backfire and not hit the dirt. They give you medals for surviving over there, but nobody tells you how to survive here.
That is the silent battle fought by so many of our bravest. Today, we are honored to share the story of Evie Brooks, a retired sergeant major from North Carolina who faced her toughest fight not on the battlefield, but within the walls of her own home. I'm Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we bear witness to the incredible strength it takes to heal the wounds no one else can see.
After 20 years, 2 months, and 12 days in the Army, my world became very small and quiet. That's how I liked it. My apartment was my fortress. Everything had its place. My boots were lined up by the door, perfectly polished, even though they never went anywhere more exciting than the corner store. My bed was made with hospital corners, the sheets pulled so tight you could bounce a quarter off them. Routine was my armor. Wake up at 0500. Physical training, running laps in the little park until my lungs burned, because a tired body meant a quieter mind. Then coffee. Black. Stare out the window. The rest of the day was about filling the hours, cleaning weapons I no longer carried, reading military history, avoiding phone calls from my sister, who always asked if I was doing okay in that soft, worried voice that made my skin crawl. On the surface, I was the model veteran, disciplined, self-sufficient, contained. People would see me and nod, thank you for your service. They saw the haircut, the posture, the scar through my eyebrow, and they saw a hero. They didn't see the woman who had to check every exit in a coffee shop, or who couldn't sit with her back to the door. They saw strength, but my life wasn't about being strong. It was about managing the cracks, making sure nobody saw how close the whole dam was to breaking.
The weight, it wasn't a memory, not exactly. It was a constant state of being. Hypervigilance, they call it. For me, it was like the air was always humming with a low-grade threat. A plastic bag skittering down the street sounded like an IED. A crowd of smiling people felt like a potential ambush. Sleep was the worst. It wasn't rest. It was a deployment. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart hammering against my ribs, the smell of sand and cordite so real I could taste it. My own bed was a hostile environment. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of a world that had moved on without me. Everyone else was living in full color, and I was stuck in this grainy, desaturated film reel of the past. Friends would invite me out for drinks, and I'd just feel alien. Their laughter was too loud, their problems too small. They were worried about office politics and what to watch on Netflix. I was worried the waiter dropping a tray was an explosion. It was a profound, crushing loneliness to be surrounded by people and feel completely, utterly unseen.
There were moments, these tiny fissures in my fortress. I was in the grocery store one afternoon in the produce aisle. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, was laughing, holding an apple up to her mom's face. Just pure, uncomplicated joy. And for a second, the humming stopped. The world went quiet. And I thought, I don't remember how to feel that. It wasn't sadness, not yet. It was just a void, an awareness of something missing that was so fundamental, I couldn't even name it. I used to be that person. I used to laugh without checking my 6. Another time, I was watching some dumb action movie. The hero gets knocked down, bruised and bleeding, and his friend says, stay with me, stay with me. And I just shut the TV off because that's what it felt like. Some essential part of me was bleeding out and there was no one there to see it, no one to tell me to stay. These weren't big, dramatic moments. They were quiet. A whisper in the back of my mind that said, this isn't living, Evie. This is just not dying.
The 4th of July, my sister, bless her heart, dragged me to the town celebration in the park. It'll be good for you, Evie. Get some fresh air. Be around people. I knew it was a bad idea. The crowds, the noise, but I went for her. I found a spot on the edge of the blanket, my back against a solid oak tree, mapping every possible line of sight. I was managing. I was breathing. Then dusk fell, and the first firework went up. It wasn't the colorful explosion that got me. It was the sound. That high-pitched whistle on the way up, followed by the deep percussive thump that echoed in my chest. And suddenly, I wasn't in a park in North Carolina anymore. The smell of hot dogs was replaced by dust and diesel. The laughter of children became screams I'd tried for years to forget. The popping of the firecrackers became the rhythmic crackle of small arms fire. My body reacted before my mind did. I was on the ground, pulling my sister down with me, screaming, "Get down! Incoming!" People were staring. My sister was trying to soothe me, her voice a million miles away. A man, probably just a concerned citizen, came running over asking if I was okay. I saw him as a threat. I saw his outstretched hand, and I reacted. I don't even remember getting up, but suddenly I had him pinned against the tree, my forearm across his throat. The look in his eyes, it wasn't anger. It was pure terror. And that look snapped me back. The sounds of the park flooded in, the crying kids, my sister pleading my name, and the horrifying, crushing weight of what I'd just done. I let him go, and I just ran. I ran until my lungs were fire and shame was a hot bile in my throat. I hadn't just lost control, I had become the monster I was so afraid of. Back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. My first instinct was to rationalize. It was the noise. I was tired. It was a one-time thing. The military mindset kicked in hard. You don't show weakness. You compartmentalize. You push it down, lock it in a box, and drive on. I started cleaning. I scrubbed the floors until my knuckles were raw. I disassembled and reassembled my old service pistol until the metal was warm. Anything to keep my hands busy, to stop my mind from replaying the terror on that man's face. But the fear was a living thing in the room with me. It wasn't fear of combat anymore. It was fear of myself. Fear that the war had fundamentally broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed. What if I hurt someone? What if I couldn't tell the difference between then and now ever again? The thought of seeking help felt like a profound failure. A sergeant major doesn't ask for help. A sergeant major provides it. Admitting I was broken felt like betraying every soldier I ever led, every standard I ever upheld. It felt worse than dying. So I told myself it would pass. I just needed to double down on my routines, isolate more, build the walls of my fortress higher. But this time, I knew the enemy wasn't outside the walls. It was inside, and it was winning. The next morning, I couldn't leave. I got dressed in my running clothes, laced up my sneakers, put my hand on the doorknob, and I froze. My heart started pounding, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. The hallway outside my apartment suddenly felt like a kill zone. Every creak of the building was a footstep. Every distant siren was an alarm. I backed away from the door like it was rigged with an explosive. I spent the whole day like that, pacing, staring at the door, trying to force my body to obey, to just walk outside. By the second day, I'd stopped trying. I just sat on the floor in the living room, my back against the couch, watching the dust motes dance in the slivers of sunlight. My phone buzzed endlessly with texts from my sister. I ignored them. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I was a prisoner. The silence I had once craved was now filled with ghosts. On the third night, it all just broke. There was no single thought. It was just a crushing wave of despair. I curled into a ball on the floor and I sobbed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was this silent, racking, full-body grief for the woman I used to be, for the peace I might never have. It felt like my soul was being torn apart. And in that moment, at the absolute bottom, a single, clear thought cut through the noise. I would rather die fighting this than live like this.
The crying stopped, leaving me hollowed out and strangely calm. The path forward was terrifying, but it was clear. The way I was living was a slow death. Continuing to isolate, to pretend, to suck it up was a surrender, and I was done surrendering. The real act of cowardice wasn't asking for help. It was letting the war win, right here in my living room. I knew what I had to do. I had to face it. All of it. The firefights, the losses, the things I'd done, the things I'd seen. I had to talk about it with someone who wasn't there. Someone I didn't trust. A civilian. The thought made me physically ill. It was the biggest strategic risk I'd ever taken. It meant admitting I didn't have the intel, that I was lost, that I needed a guide to get me out of enemy territory, the enemy territory of my own mind. It was a complete violation of my ingrained warrior ethos, but it was the only mission that mattered now.
I crawled over to my laptop, my whole body shaking. I looked up the number for the local VA mental health clinic. For 20 minutes, I just stared at the digits on the screen. Making that call felt more frightening than kicking in a door in Fallujah. It was an admission, a final, irrevocable confession that I was not okay. My hand trembled as I dialed. A sterile, automated voice answered. I navigated the phone tree, my heart in my throat, when a real person finally picked up, a woman with a tired but kind voice. I couldn't speak. She said, "VA Mental Health, how can I help you?" And there was just silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, waiting. I closed my eyes, picturing myself on that floor, and I forced the words out. They came out as a choked whisper. I think I need help. I'm a veteran. Saying it out loud felt like a grenade going off in the quiet of my apartment. It was terrifying, but it was also the first time in years I hadn't been lying. The woman on the other end just said, "Okay, you called the right place. Let's get you started." And for the first time, a tiny crack of light broke through the darkness.
Getting started was one thing. The follow-through was a war of attrition. The VA system is a labyrinth of paperwork and waiting lists. My first appointment was 6 weeks out. 6 weeks! When you're drowning, 6 weeks feels like a lifetime. The intake specialist was a young guy, probably fresh out of grad school. He had a checklist. Do you experience nightmares, flashbacks, irritability? He asked it all with this detached, clinical air, like he was asking about my allergies. He hadn't earned the right to hear my stories, and my entire being recoiled from his questions.
I gave him clipped one-word answers. My military stoicism was a reflex, a shield I couldn't seem to lower. He'd look at me over his clipboard, this strong, stoic woman, and I could feel his doubt. She doesn't look that bad. Meanwhile, inside, our hurricane was raging. My family, when I finally told them, tried to be supportive, but they just didn't get it. My dad, a veteran of a different generation, told me to find a hobby, keep busy. My sister sent me links to yoga retreats and articles on mindfulness. They were trying to put a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. It made me feel even more alone. The biggest resistance, though, came from inside. The voice of the sergeant major in my head was relentless. You're weak. You're letting everyone down. What would your soldiers think if they saw you crying in some therapist's office? Every step toward healing felt like a step away from the identity that had defined and saved me for 20 years. Therapy wasn't a relief. Not at first. It was an excavation. Every session felt like walking back into a minefield I had barely survived the first time. Talking about it made the nightmares more vivid, the daytime flashbacks sharper. There were days I'd leave that office and just have to pull my car over because I couldn't see the road through my tears. The temptation to quit, to just go back to my quiet, orderly, suffocating fortress was immense. At least there, the pain was familiar. It was a dull ache I knew how to manage. This new pain was sharp, unpredictable, and raw. I felt completely stripped of my armor. I'd walk down the street and feel like everyone could see right through me, see the brokenness, the shame. I missed the numbness. I craved it. There were so many nights I sat on that floor again, questioning everything. Did I make a mistake? Am I just making it worse? The loneliness was staggering. I was fighting the defining battle of my life, and I had to do it all in silence. I hit my wall about 3 months in. My therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, was guiding me through a particularly brutal memory, a convoy ambush outside Ramadi. And as I described the chaos, the sounds, the smells, I wasn't in her office anymore. I was back in the Humvee. I could feel the unbearable heat, taste the metallic tang of fear in my mouth. I could see my young private's face, the confusion and terror in his eyes in the second before. The memory, which I had kept locked away for a decade, came crashing through with the force of a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. All the progress, all the work, it felt like a lie. I wasn't healing. I was just torturing myself. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair over. I can't do this, I said, my voice shaking with a rage that was really just bottomless pain. This is pointless. I'm done. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob, ready to bolt and never come back. In that moment, I was utterly convinced. I was permanently broken. Healing was a myth, and I was a fool for ever believing in it. Surrender felt like the only sane option left. Dr. Sharma didn't try to stop me. She just said, very quietly, "Before you go, I want you to try one more thing. There's a women's veteran support group that meets in the building tonight. Just sit in the back. You don't have to say a word." I don't know why I agreed. Maybe I was just too exhausted to argue. I went. I sat in the corner, arms crossed, ready to bolt. Then a woman started speaking. She was maybe 60, a former army nurse from the Vietnam era, and she talked about the ghosts she carried. She described the feeling of being an alien in her own country, the guilt of surviving when others didn't, the years she spent hiding her pain. It was like she was reading from the pages of my own soul. She looked around the room and said, "The bravest thing I ever did wasn't on a medevac chopper. It was walking into a room like this and saying, 'I'm not okay.'" In that instant, something shifted in me. I wasn't alone. My pain wasn't unique. It was shared. I wasn't broken. I was a combat veteran, and this was my new battlefield. I went back to Dr. Sharma's office the next week. I kept going to the support group. It was still hard. It was still painful, but it was no longer lonely. The climb back wasn't a straight line. It was a series of small, hard-won victories. It was staying in a crowded grocery store for 10 minutes instead of 5. It was hearing a siren and being able to remind myself, "You are safe. You are home." On a therapist's recommendation, I joined a veterans adaptive sports program. I learned to kayak. There was something about being on the water, the rhythmic pull of a paddle, the silence broken only by birdsong, that was profoundly healing. It taught my body a new kind of strength, one based on balance and endurance, not combat readiness. I started talking, really talking, with the other vets in the program. We didn't always talk about the war. We talked about bad knees and good fishing spots. We made jokes only we would understand. Slowly, carefully, I was building a new squadron, a new fire team. I was building a new life. The change was quiet. One day, I was sitting by the lake after kayaking, and I realized the humming was gone. The constant, low-grade thrum of anxiety had been replaced by quiet, real quiet. It wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was peaceful. I started sleeping through the night. I found myself smiling at strangers. The biggest shift came when a young female Marine, fresh out of the service and struggling, joined our sports group. I saw the same haunted look in her eyes that I once had in mine. Without thinking, I went over, sat next to her, and just listened. I didn't offer advice. I just let her know she was seen. My past wasn't a liability anymore. It was a map, and I could use it to help guide others through the wilderness. If I could speak to that woman, the one curled up on the floor of her apartment, I wouldn't tell her it gets easier. I tell her it gets different. I tell her that all the discipline and toughness she learned in the Army is exactly what she'll need for this fight. And I tell her this: your strength isn't just in survival, but in the courage to heal. You are not broken. You are resilient. The war doesn't have to be the end of your story. It's just the beginning of this one.
Thank you, Evie, for sharing your story of profound resilience with us. Your journey is a powerful reminder that true strength often lies in vulnerability. If Evie's story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words of support create the community that makes Unbroken Women so special. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and click here to watch another story of a woman who found her power in the face of adversity.